3 years ago, I was writing a jukebox musical of a giant star we've all heard of. I set the first table reading with an all-star cast for Broadway producers on Friday the 13th of March 2020, less than 12 hours before Broadway shut down for the pandemic. Then it turns out that iconic music I was going to use, not available. So a little over a year ago, I decided, to hell with it, I'll write my own music. The show is called The Road Home. And this is The Road to the Road Home. Hello, welcome back to The Road to the Road Home. And today in episode 2, we are going to be talking about the song Summer Day. And the purpose of the song Summer Day is to introduce or reintroduce our main character, Matthew, who we have met at this point in the prologue, which takes place 18 years before on graduation night, a high school graduation night, where he and Carrie, the female lead, are deciding whether or not they want to progress from best friends, childhood best friends, into a romantic relationship. Well, the decision-making process is interrupted by tragedy, which pulls them apart. But we don't really know as an audience what happened after that. So this is the first time we are now in our present day in the show. And a present day in the context of The Road Home is 1980. So we need to tell a lot of story in this song, both in the song itself, but also in the trappings of the song, right? So we need to know that 18 years have gone by. Matthew Edelstein is now known as Matthew Walker. And Matthew Walker is embarking on a successful country rock musician tour. So we know at the beginning of this, it's the opening night of his big new tour. This is his new hit single. And so as the song goes through, we're going to be bouncing around to different locations on the tour, so time is passing. So we learn right away he's changed his name, and now he's successful. He went from dreaming of being a musician in high school to now being a successful one. But in the song itself, he is, I guess I would say it's secretly autobiographical, because he's selling it as a, standard country tune about, summer nights in the country and being in love and that sort of a thing. But we, as the audience, know that he's actually telling the story of his friendship with Carrie and being in love with Carrie. And at this point, because we don't know what has happened in the last 18 years, the transition into the song, where it goes into a romantic relationship, well, did that happen? Did that not happen? Is he imagining it? Are they together now? We don't know any of these things yet, but we do know that this song is autobiographical for him. He's telling the story of his relationship with Carrie. So that's where it comes from a storytelling perspective. From a writing perspective, I'm trying to write something that is both continuing to tell the story, fill in some of the gaps of Matthew and Carrie's childhood together, but also it needs to be somewhat believable as a pop tune in 1980 in the country rock genre. So you're sort of setting yourself up for failure when you're writing a song in a show that's supposed to be a successful song, because you're setting it up like, I'm saying this is successful, but I'm giving it to the audience to say whether or not you believe that. So, which actually brings me to one of the changes that I made when I released this song here on YouTube. You can listen to the whole song right there, I think there. And get a sense of the entire song altogether before I break it apart, like I'm doing here. But there's going to be a difference. If you, let's say you're the big fancy Broadway producer I've just sent this demo to, you're going to notice a difference between that one and the YouTube version, because I incorporate some of the storytelling into a sound cue, right? At the beginning of the song, which I'm going to play for you here. Let's go to Pro Tools, right? And I'm just going to play you the beginning of the song here with the sound cue, which is not in the version that you're going to hear on YouTube. So we begin the song, and right here, there is this sound effect of a big crowd cheering the beginning of the song, as if they know what the song is, they're excited to hear it. It's a rock concert, right? Well, I didn't put that in the demo released on YouTube because out of context, it sounds like I'm cheering my own song. So you'll notice I took that one out. So, when I approached the construction of this song, I wanted to, again, tell the two stories. It's character-based, but also it has to exist in the pop world. This is the diegetic song in the musical, so he knows he's singing, and everybody else is hearing the music. So it's a song within a song, essentially. And I think I should also point out that in the intro you may have, and I mentioned in the previous video, that this show used to be a jukebox musical. And so this song served the same purpose in the original version of the show using another artist's music. So not only do I have to accomplish all of those pieces, but I'm also replacing a world-famous song we've all heard of, which is a phenomenal song, and I could never compete with it. But if you listen real hard, there's a bit of an Easter egg in this song, in the lyrics, that makes reference to the song it is replacing. But, so let's go to the piano, and I want to just talk a few things compositionally about how I approached this song and how it relates to Crossroad, the other song that I have talked about in this way. So I'm going to move the microphone over. And so, the way this song, the verse is constructed, it sort of begins, hold on microphone, you can do this. All right, so we begin on a D. I used to walk the fields alone. Between the stalks, the silence was my home. No one traced my footsteps in the dust or through the leaves on trails unknown. Now, if you were listening really carefully, you'd be like, there's a similarity there between that and Crossroad. And these are both the introductory songs of Matthew and Carrie. And because I want to tie them together, the two songs, they're in different keys, obviously, but they both begin with the first two chords. It's the same first two chords in both songs. So, I talked about it last time, so we did it with the one, we're in D. Used to walk the fields alone. And this second chord, right, this second chord is a D chord in the right hand and a G in the left hand. So basically it's a 1 over 4. It's not a 1 chord over a 4 chord, it's just 1 with a 4 in the key in the bass, which essentially is a fancy trick out version of just going to the 4 chord, which would work perfectly fine. I used to walk the fields alone, right? Perfectly fine. So it's a simulated 4 chord, but I just think it sounds more interesting, more epic to have the used to walk the fields alone, because we have a little bit of that dissonance, because you've got the F and the G together, but it has that sort of a feel, which I like. I just like that sound. But what I'm talking about, if we go back to Crossroad, it's the same thing. We are arriving at a crossroad. So that's a F over a B flat, which is the same. 1 chord. This is the 4 in the key of F. So we are arriving at a crossroad. So they're actually beginning the song exactly the same way with both of the characters there. And that's intentional, right? I like that sound, right? But it is also intentional because these are the two characters that we're going to be following throughout this entire show, right? And they're going to start together and they're going to diverge and they're going to come back together and they're going to diverge. And then hopefully at the end, we'll be rooting for them to come back together. So they have this sort of tonal continuity between the two of them. They're both starting out looking at the world in this particular way, tied together by that sort of musical couple of chords. Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the little, music nerd parts of it. But if we go back to Pro Tools, that's not Pro Tools, that's Pro Tools. And we can see how all of this comes together. It starts very simply with just the guitar, which is where, on stage, we're going to be seeing this lights transition. It's going to come out of darkness, and we're just going to hear this before the lights come up on the stage. So it's going to look like a rock concert. I want the lights. I want the poster.
I used to walk the fields
and now, what he's doing here, he's singing about his time with Gary growing up.
My own. No one traced my footsteps in the dust or through the leaves on trails unknown.
So, very simple. That's just the first half of the verse. Very simple. He's just sort of talking about and so. We talked about in the last song about how I'm constantly adding and layering more things. And you'll see here in the Pro Tools session, you'll see the little whoosh, the transition I go into there. And then when we get to the chorus, so he repeats that
then
phrase.
One day your smiling face appeared,
second half of the verse.
Peeking out between the corn, so pretty but beard. The girl from different lands who cocked her head and took my hands, and we took flight on a summer day when the sun just starts to rise. On a summer day with you and open skies, running through the trees, scraping all our knees, still a kiss on the Sunday evening breeze. To the fireflies, say goodnight to the summer day.
So there's a lyric tie in to the previous song. The first song in the show is a song that they sing on graduation night, and we hear the word fireflies, right? It's a country thing. It's definitely something I experienced growing up in the woods. At a certain hour at night in the summers, fireflies appear. It's very romantic. It looks great, and we mentioned that in the opening number, and so I'm not just lazy and just using the same, visual reference again, but this is Matthew continuing to work through that night over and over again. So he's making references to that night all the way through this song. We're going to find out later that he hasn't spoken to her in 18 years. They haven't seen each other since that night. We actually see the last time they lay eyes on each other in 18 years in that scene. But when we come back on the song, think about it again, he's obsessing about that night over and over and over again. And so he's referencing it in his music. And I should point out, this is a song, because it's diegetic, because he is performing this as a musician, this is a song that in the context of the show, The Road Home, Matthew wrote this, right? I didn't write this. Matthew wrote this. I mean, obviously I did. But in the context of the show, he is supposed to have written this. So these words and these lyrics are chosen very specifically, that he chose these, and he's choosing to sing these as part of his single there. So that's why we get 2 Firefly references in the first 2 songs. So I'm using it is sort of repetition, right? Both in the first 2 chords of both of the songs and repeating that image, but I'm doing it to tie them to each other. It's not, I wouldn't call it like a leitmotif or anything like that, but it is certainly intentionally referencing little bits here. And so I don't think people are going to ever notice that, and I'm like, oh, fireflies again, or like, oh, that's a 1/4 again, right? But it's subconscious. And that's sort of what I'm hoping to accomplish, is people start to feel these connections, even if they're not necessarily getting down to the sheet music. I'm like, oh, that's the same chord, right? So when we get to the chorus here, let's go back to the piano cam, and I just want to show you a little bit of what I'm doing with the chord progression, which is, again, because it's a pop tune, it's very simple. It's designed to be simple. But his chorus here, on a summer day when the sun just won't go down, on a summer day with no one but you around. So what we have here in the chords is a very typical chord progression, right? 1, 5, 6. Now normally in the progression we go down to the 4. So and that is like the classic chord progression you hear in any trillion different songs. But I want him to continue going a little bit further. So I start that way. And the sun just won't go down on the summer day with no one but you. Now, instead of going to the G, I'm going to go back to the 5, but it's going to be the first inversion of it. So, no one but you around because this leads us back to one. And so it basically, by going from the 6 back to the first inversion of 5, instead of trying to resolve that, we're going back to D, so we're kind of resolving it, but we're not. It doesn't feel like we're doing that. So we can do that. Running through the trees, scraping all our knees, still a kiss in the Sunday evening breeze. To the fireflies, say goodnight to the summer day. So that's the chorus that we're going to hear a couple of times. So structurally in the song, it's very simple, right? It's verse, chorus, chorus, up a step. But again, it's just under 3 minutes long. It's a pop tune. It's designed to sort of live in that world. So if we go to Pro Tools, here you can see when the chorus kicks in, I'm going to add some more stuff, right? As I always talk about. So we've done acoustic guitars layered over piano, bass, and drums up to this point. But now we want to add a little bit of electric, a little bit of extra feel to it in the chorus here. On a summer day, when the sun just starts to rise. So what we're hearing here, first off, is just this sort of scratch, right? It's a guitar scratch that we're hearing, which is, again, it doesn't even really have a pitch, but I think it adds just a little bit of energy. It's a little percussion, but on the guitar, and I love percussion. I love all of that, but I layer that in with this other little electric Americana sort of feel. So without the scratches, this is what it is. Add a little scratch. Now it really starts to find that groove. So that's what I do there to add for the first chorus. So after the first chorus, we go and do another verse. The end of the first chorus. Firefly, say goodnight to the summer day. Firefly reference. And as the years go by, I see your jeans don't. So Matthew has told the story of their childhood friendship. And here's where we start to go into their teenagehood, right? So he's telling the story over a period of time. And so now he's like, oh, hey, you know what? We're now teenagers. It's starting to feel a little different. I'm starting to notice little different things. They're grown up a little bit. And so this is where he starts to notice, oh, hey. And in this version of the song, which is also kind of reflected in the scene, she's like, hey, why don't we, move into this different type of relationship? Years go by, I see your jeans don't fit the way they did before. A twinkle in your eye makes me afraid, but coming back for more. You can tell he's scared about it. Again, but something changed, and we will never be the same. And now, this is where we diverge, right? Because in the scene that we saw in the flashback, they didn't actually get together. But in the song, he's certainly implying that they did. So now, do we trust our narrator here? Are we to believe this song? I don't know. We start to get into maybe he's inventing. Maybe it's I wish it had been. But of course, he's also pretending that this is just a fictional. This isn't a story. He's not, he's not pretending that, he's not saying that this is actually about a real person. And so instead of finishing that thought lyrically, he kind of diverts, right? He goes into a little sort of session that doesn't even really have any lyrics. So that serves two purposes, right? A, he changes the subject and just sort of goes into like, let's just sort of rock out a little bit. But also, in the production of it, this is where we start flashing between different cities. So time is passing. So on his tour, it sounds like this. And I say, just a whole. I'm saying, more backup singers come in. So in between each of those phrases, he's like, hey, I'm in Dallas. Hey, I'm in Detroit. Hey, I'm in Green Bay, whatever it is. And so we're going to have little subtle lighting shifts. It's basically the same setup because he's on tour. But we will have some sort of a little passage of time change in the lights as he's quickly going through these cities. Before he gets to the last city, it's back in North Carolina, which is where the show takes place and where he grew up. And this is where we see a change in his tone where he realizes, I have mixed feelings about being here, as opposed to like, yeah, I'm happy with wherever. But we go back into the chorus once again, as opposed to spend any time in that moment. He goes right into the chorus. But again, now we have big, lots of backup singers. So, like as I was talking about last week, I'm always wanting to build. Every time we repeat something, it has to be different. It has to get bigger or smaller or different or be arranged differently. And so what I've done is I've put in a whole bunch of backup singers. So I'm going to solo out the backup vocals here so you can see them or hear them just by themselves. And you can see here in my Pro Tools box, there's a million of them. I think I mentioned last episode how I record these. I record each vocal line twice and bounce them stereo, so it has that more of a chorus effect. But if we do just vocals, let's put Matthew in there too, otherwise it'll sound weird. And we come out of the sections here. So here's just the backup vocals.
Crying, one summer, I'm singing, one summer.
This is the transition into the chorus.
On a summer day, when the sun just starts to rise.
If we take Matthew out, they're not saying any words. So, basically, I'm using the voices as an instrument, right? So, and these are diegetic backup singers, right? So Matthew, the musician, the artist, has backup singers on stage. So they're right there. They're singing with him, and they can sound awesome and all together. And so I'm using them to support Matthew, but they're there to create that fuller sound, that sort of exciting fuller sound, I guess is what I'm looking for. So that's how it all comes together there. And so the song finishes. Same chorus as before.
To the fireflies, say goodnight to a summer day.
And so, in a pop tune, you gotta go out big. What's the best way to do that? Key change. So we have a soloist come in here and cover the key change as it all comes in together. Sounds like this.
Goodnight to a summer day. I just want one more. I just want one more summer day.
I want a new key.
On a summer day with you and open skies. Running through the trees, scraping all the leaves, still a kiss in the Sunday afternoon breeze. To the fireflies, say goodnight to the summer day.
And so in this version of it, we're finishing the scene, finishing the song. It's now the end of the concert, and he walks off stage to begin our next scene, which takes place backstage after the concert. But anyway, so that's how it all comes together there. There have been times this has been the opening number of the show. There are times it hasn't. It's still fluid at this point, right? Because I'm still writing. The show is continuing to develop and change. So that's Summer Day. It's actually not wildly complicated in any way, but there's a lot of important storytelling happening there. I reprise this later. So hopefully that was interesting to anybody, if anybody's watching this. As I say always, hey, are you a big fancy Broadway producer? Are you a big fancy agent? Well, you can reach me, with the... Do I have an overlay? No, that's not right. Never mind. Anyway, you can reach me at keithvarneywritesstuff@gmail.com and keithvarneywriter.com. So that's it for now. You can check out the full song in the link below, as well as the other song I've released, Crossroad, and a similar video like this talking about how I created Crossroad. I will continue to do these because, I don't know, I'm enjoying it, and we will continue the journey on the road to the road home. Thank you very much for watching.